While planning my travel for this year, I realized that I've never talked about all of the places that I've been. Now, I've been to Europe and Asia, but 2021 is going to focus on the US. And today, I'm going to tell you about all the states I've been to as we scratch them off the map. Let me know in the comments how many states you've been to and if there's any hidden gems that I need to check out across the country. Let's get started. Okay. I'm going to start with Ohio, Indiana, and Michigan. Ohio is where I grew up. We traveled to Indiana all the time, and luckily I got to go to Michigan to visit all of my family. Okay, after that, one of the first trips I remember was to New York City. We drove across Pennsylvania and out to visit family in New Jersey, and then into the city. I was only like 6 years old, so there's very few things that I remember. I specifically remember taking the ferry into the city, how big the pizza was, and how big the Statue of Liberty looked. Now this is a picture of my mom and I the first time we went to New York City. Obviously those memories stuck with me because a few years ago we went back just to eat pizza. And in 2019, I went back by myself. I took the ferry into the city for the first time since I was a kid. I also got to go to the US Open and see Serena Williams play.
4 Olympic gold medal. Please welcome 6-time US Open champion,
And see Hannah Gadsby perform. It was such a fun trip, and obviously, I ate more pizza. A few years later, we did go to Niagara Falls, so we got to see more of the state of New York. Now, the next trip that I remember was to Maine. It was the first time that I ever flew. We went to Boothbay Harbor. It was gorgeous. Somehow I convinced my mom to go sea lion watching. It was the first time I had been on a boat on the ocean, and I was so happy. The next trip I went on was the 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. That was the first time I had been to Maryland or Virginia. Luckily, I've been back to see Baltimore since then and go hiking in Virginia. The next new state I went to was Illinois when we went to Chicago for our senior class trip. Okay. After high school, I joined the track and field team in college and got to see so many places. We did drive quite a bit, which right now has a big upside. Remember my freshman year, we went down to Florida. Sophomore year, we went to South Carolina and North Carolina. We've been to Alabama and drove through all of these states to get there. Driven through Kentucky quite a few times, but I have stopped to see Mammoth Caves National Park, which is pretty cool. Same for Tennessee. While we drove through on this trip, I've been back a few times to see Nashville. One of our spring break meets was at University of Alabama. We had meets at Florida A&M and Florida State. We drove through Georgia. Now, beyond driving through, I have gotten to see a very pretty side of Atlanta for work. And Courtney and I just visited Savannah. Did stay in Myrtle Beach for track. As far as North Carolina, I've been to Coastal Carolina University, NC State, and later Appalachian State. Courtney and I also tried to drive down the Blue Ridge Parkway on our most recent trip, but it was definitely raining. Because of all the clouds, this might be one of the best overlooks we get all day. My freshman year of track, we also flew to Colorado. Luckily this summer, I did get to explore more of Colorado. I went to all 4 national parks. My senior year, we also went to Arkansas. We joined a conference my senior year of college, and our conference championship for track was in Fargo, North Dakota. Of course, we drove across Wisconsin and Minnesota to get there. At this point, I have no idea how many times I've been to Fargo. I think I still know my way around town. My very last meet as a college athlete was at Southern Utah University. I could not ask for a more pretty place to finish my college career. I had an opportunity to be the graduate assistant for the track and cross country teams after I graduated. While working on my master's degree in communication, I was able to coach and go to so many more states. We went to South Dakota and North Dakota quite a few more times. Again, we drove, so that took us across Iowa and into Nebraska. I did get to see more of South Dakota this summer when Courtney and I went out to Badlands. We got to see Wall Drug, Mount Rushmore, and climb up to Crazy Horse. Went to a cross-country meet in Tulsa, Oklahoma at Oral Roberts. I think we flew for that meet, so I'm going to leave Missouri covered. While I was coaching, I went to the National Coaches Convention every year. It was in Phoenix a few times and also in San Antonio. I've also been to Austin, Texas. After I finished my master's degree, I got a job, and the quantity of states I was able to visit went down quite a bit. But in 2017, I went out to California for my first ever backpacking trip, which was a solo trip to Yosemite. The next year, my sister and I did a half marathon at Zion National Park. Both flew into Las Vegas, we spent a night there, and then drove out to Zion for the race. When we signed up for the race, the average temperature in Zion in February was supposed to be 40 degrees. When we started the race, it was -1. But it doesn't matter, we finished the race. Later that day, we got to explore Zion. After my sister flew home, I went over to Death Valley to check that out. And did some hiking in the Red Rocks of Las Vegas. I did some traveling over these same areas, but the next time I saw new states was in 2019. This trip is important because it was really a practice trip. I took a road trip to the East Coast, went backpacking in New Jersey, and took a solo trip into New York City. After that, I headed north. I drove through Connecticut and stayed in Massachusetts. And then I went through Vermont and hiked in the Green Mountains, then up to the White Mountains of Vermont. I had seen pictures of Franconia Ridge, and while it was a tougher hike than I expected, it was well worth it. The trip was equally important because that's when I decided I had everything I needed to quit my job and travel full-time. That's exactly what I did 6 months later in February of 2020. Those are all of the states I've been to. I'm very disappointed that this summer in Colorado I didn't head down to New Mexico. I've also never been to Rhode Island or Delaware, but let's add them up and see how many I have. Somehow I missed Missouri, but in December of 2018, I took a trip to St. Louis. Back to counting. So I haven't been to Rhode Island, Delaware, Mississippi, Louisiana, Kansas, New Mexico, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. Big gap up here, Alaska, and Hawaii. This means I've been to 37 states and I have 13 yet to explore. And one of my goals for 2021 is to see all of them. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure that you click that button to see all of our adventures as we cross the US. Make sure you give this video a big like while you're here, and I'll see you on the road. I think I did a pretty good job. I got a bigger map so that you can see it. I think by the time we get to Texas, I'm gonna regret it. Almost left out the UP, but I got it covered. I'm happy I get to edit out all the scratching for you.